All right, let's jump right in. We're about to uncover one of the most incredible, but honestly almost forgotten stories in all of American history. It's about a ship called the Brooklyn and how its passengers became the unlikely, forgotten founders of California. To really get this, let's start right in the middle of the chaos. Picture it. You're on a ship, trapped below deck, and a massive storm is raging. One of the passengers, Augusta Joyce Crocheron, later wrote that the roaring of the wind and howling of the tempest made a scene and feeling indescribable. So you gotta ask yourself, why would 238 people, and get this, more than 100 of them were kids, willingly sign up for a trip so dangerous it would push them to the absolute brink? Well, the mission was enormous. They were trying to create a floating colony, basically moving an entire society across the ocean. See, back in 1846, these Mormon pioneers were facing really intense religious persecution. So they planned a massive exodus, a complete departure from the United States. The goal? To build a new Zion, a safe haven, way out in what was then still Mexican territory, Alta California. Now, this whole plan was huge, and it had two parts. You've probably heard of the first part: Brigham Young leading pioneers across the plains in wagon trains. But there was this other, lesser-known mission happening at the same time by sea. The ship Brooklyn had the really tough job, sailing all the way around the continent with all the heavy equipment. We're talking a printing press, farming tools, even millstones. Everything you need to build a city from the ground up. And who was leading this wild sea adventure? A guy named Samuel Brannan. He was only 26 years old, and people called him an erratic genius. He was just full of energy, super ambitious, and really, really shrewd. Kind of the perfect, complicated person for a mission this daring. And make no mistake, this was not a ship full of rugged adventurers. It was a floating town. Just look at these numbers. Of the 238 passengers, 100 of them were children. These were whole families, gambling everything on finding a new home across the ocean. So this incredible mission led to an even more incredible journey, a 24,000-mile ordeal. This timeline really puts the sheer scale of it into perspective. They left New York in February, sailed all the way down around the terrifying Cape Horn, made a stop on the island made famous by Robinson Crusoe, resupplied in Hawaii, and finally, they arrived in a little town called Yerba Buena, what we now call San Francisco, on the last day of July. That's almost 6 full months at sea. So what was life actually like on this ship? Well, one passenger called it a staunch tub, which should tell you something. It was just brutal. They survived 2 storms so bad that women and children had to be literally tied to their beds. The drinking water, it became, and I quote, thick and ropey with slime. Their food was mostly just salt pork and stale bread. Oh, and the living quarters were incredibly cramped. We're talking less than 6 feet of headroom and swarming with rats and cockroaches. A journey of 24,000 miles. But the distance wasn't the only cost. 10 people died along the way. Many of them were children. They were buried at sea. But even in all that hardship, there was new life. 2 babies were born on the voyage, a boy and a girl, who were beautifully named Atlantic and Pacific. And all of this leads up to their arrival. And let me tell you, it came with one last jaw-dropping twist. This is the part of the story that is just so wild. They put themselves through a 6-month, 24,000-mile journey for one reason: to leave the United States. And when they finally sailed into the harbor, what did they find? The United States had gotten there first. Can you just imagine the scene? A uniformed American naval officer boards their ship and announces, "Ladies and gentlemen, I have the honor to inform you that you are in the United States of America." The shock must have been unbelievable. They had sailed right into the middle of the Mexican-American War. Their timing was just uncanny. They showed up only 3 weeks after American forces had captured Yerba Buena. So that whole plan's build their own peaceful colony, gone instantly. The 70 men on board were immediately drafted into military service, and their dream of building a new Zion was suddenly completely on hold. The final nail in the coffin for their original plan came about a year later. Samuel Brannan rode all the way east to meet up with Brigham Young's overland group in what's now Wyoming. He passionately argued for them to continue on to the beautiful California coast. But Young looked around at the dry Great Basin and made a decision. This was the place. He chose to settle what would become Salt Lake City, not California. But their story doesn't end there. Not even close. Because this is the moment where these pioneers, basically started to forge the Golden State against all odds. So, with the big group plan officially dead and the main church settling in Utah, the Brooklyn pioneers were pretty much on their own. They were stranded, you could say, forced to figure out how to make a life for themselves in a place that was nothing like what they'd planned for. And then everything changed. Gold. It was discovered at Sutter's Mill. And guess who just happened to be there with a printing press and a newspaper called the California Star? Samuel Brannan. He's the one who famously ran through the streets of San Francisco yelling, "Gold, gold from the American River," and used his paper to blast the news to the world, literally helping to ignite the California gold rush. It's just amazing how much of an impact these few pioneers had. Samuel Brannan, he becomes California's first ever millionaire. Another passenger, John Horner, completely revolutionizes farming in the state and also becomes a millionaire. And Caroline Joyce, known as the Mormon Nightingale, goes on to start an orphanage after a cholera outbreak. You can literally see their legacy written all over the map of California. When they arrived, they more than doubled the population of tiny Yorba Buena, and they were essential in transforming it into San Francisco. From there, they founded towns, built farms, mills, roads, bridges. I mean, they built the actual backbone of California's early economy. So in the end, they set out on this epic journey to find a promised land, just for themselves. But instead, through this incredible twist of fate, they ended up helping to build a promised land for millions of other people. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What would California, and maybe even America, look like today if that ship, the Brooklyn, had never sailed?